This is Michael Govier from the Is It Safe podcast, and you are now clear for communication with Pop Goes Your World.
If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes, and while you're there, please leave us a rating and review.
And now it's time for our feature presentation.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 308, Idiocracy Movie Review. Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris McBrien along with Derek Myers, and this is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. This week it was over to Derek to choose a movie for us to watch. He's always trying to get me to watch anything after 1989, so he decided we go back and watch Idiocracy from 2006. But before we get to our movie review, what pop culture have you been able to take in this past week, Derek?
Hey, Chris. Well, I actually had a fair amount of time to take in a few things, starting with the recommendation you made last week with Somebody Somewhere.
Oh, I'm interested to see how this goes.
So I was very happy to discover that, and you may have mentioned this, but that the episodes are only like a half an hour long. Mm-hmm. So I sat down to watch the first one. I actually was doing while I was exercising. I thought, I'll just watch this first episode. And then it ended
based on my recommendation.
Based on your rec.
Oh, good,
I was
good,
like, okay. So it ended very quickly because it only took like 25, 30 minutes. I'm like, okay, well, I'm riding my exercise bike. I got some time. I'll let the next one run through. And I watch the next one. And I'm like, still going. I'm like, oh, well, that was pretty quick too. Okay, so I started watching like 3 or 4 episodes of the first season, all like in one day. Like I watched it 2 or 3 when I was working on, then I finished it a little later in the day. I like it. I like where it's going. I can see why you like it. I definitely like it's so heavily character driven, and the characters are also interesting and fleshed out. It is slow. It definitely starts very slow. Like I know a lot of people that I might normally recommend things to. I would be very hesitant to recommend this to them simply because I think they would be bored. They'd be on their phones and they would miss details. And I actually found that for when I was watching one of the episodes right at the end, I happened to pull up my phone to check something. And then the next thing I know, the credits are rolling and I'm like, I think I missed something. Like I could hear the dialogue and I could hear the music, but I felt I missed something. And sure enough, I went back like the 3 minutes I missed, and like so much was happening on screen that if you weren't paying attention, like it was important to the next episode. So yeah, it's one of those ones where it's worth the watch. I feel so far it's worth the watch. I'm enjoying it. It's slow, but it's paying off. But you can't be on your second screen. You have to give it your full attention, or you're just not going to enjoy it as much, because you're going to miss a lot of stuff, a lot of nuance. There's a lot of like subtlety on this show that you're not going to pick up if all you're doing is listening to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. If you're into like Marvel movies and like action and stuff, this is probably not for you. But if you like that character-driven stuff, and the thing is, like I've said this a bazillion times because I used to be an actor. An actor's job is to find the truth. And I feel like that show just represents that to me. It's like these actors are like digging into the truth of these characters in just really cool ways. I really like that show a lot. So yeah, I understand. It's not like flashy, you know.
No, and I don't think and it's certainly not trying to be. So, no. But I can understand why it's getting a lot of critical praise, because it's the kind of thing where, even after just a few episodes, I've given it now almost, I've watched 4 episodes, so I've given it 2 hours. I'm enjoying it. I want to see where it goes. I'm glad that it's in, I think, season 3 or season 4. So I know I've got quite a bit ahead of me, and that's always good when you find a new show. You're like, oh, how many episodes? Oh, there's only 3 episodes out, and now you got to wait. So it's nice to be able to just dive in and binge. So yeah, I'm gonna keep watching these through the holiday season.
Good.
And I think we can compare notes. Have you finished? Are you up to date? Or are you still in the process of watching it yourself?
No, I've only finished season 1. That's it.
Okay, well, when
finished season 1, and I've not started season 2 because I don't always have that much time to watch all that kind of stuff. But I just kind of discovered this show and was like, oh my god, it's so good.
Yeah. Okay. And then I had a chance to watch some movies. Believe me, none of these movies are winning Oscars. They were all just fun, stupid movies.
Okay.
So the first one I watched. Now, stop me if I talked about this one last week. It was a movie my wife and I watched on Tubi called The Belko Experiment.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. Never mentioned that.
the premise to this, so this one came out in 2016. We watched it on Tubi, and it was like soon leaving Tubi, and we're like, oh, we better watch it then before it leaves. And it is written by James Gunn, who people know from Guardians of the Galaxy and Suicide Squad, and he's going to be doing a bunch of the new DC Comics stuff. He's doing the new Superman movie, and so he's the writer. So it's already got like a certain kind of style. If you've seen his other movies, you're going to pick up on it quite quickly. And it's got a lot of actors that you know, but you may not know their names. And I was like, oh, I know that. So like one of the leads is a guy named Tony Goldwyn. He was the bad guy in Ghost. And John C. McGinley, and he was he's a character actor. He's been in tons of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
He was in the movie.
He was in Platoon.
He was in Platoon. Yeah, like people know him. Yeah. And Tony
Goldwyn was in I remember he was in a movie called Cuffs, if I'm not mistaken.
And he was in what's that one? Scandal, where he was the president recently, a TV show.
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, again, and it's actors like that where you see them and go, oh, I know that guy. Where do I know that guy from? And it's got a ton. Michael Rooker's in it. Again, it's got a smallish part. So you're going to recognize a lot of people. Anyway, what the movie is about is it's these people, mostly Americans, who have gone to, I want to say it's somewhere in Central America. It's in Colombia. There it is. I'm seeing it right here. And they're working for this American company in Colombia. And when they get to work one day, an announcement comes on the speaker and it says, hi, workers, there are exactly 100 of you in the building. The building is about to go into lockdown. And then all these massive shutters go over all the windows and doors, and they go, nobody is allowed to leave. In 20 minutes, 10 of you must be dead, or 30 of you will be executed. And then so the people start to turn on each other. And then, of course, the announcements keep coming up, and they're like, okay, now you got to kill 6 more people. Okay, now you got to kill 5 more people. Okay, now we've decided only one person gets to leave. So 99 people have to be dead by this time, or we're just going to gas all of you. And so they all start turning on each other. Meanwhile, some people are like, no, we can't kill each other. That's inhuman. This is, we're real people, blah, blah, blah. But of course, it just becomes this chaotic mess. But it's exactly what you think it is. It's a lot of unnecessary violence for violence's sake, but it was interesting and fun in certain ways, and it has that James Gunn sort of flair with some of the dialogue and some of the ridiculousness. And because you recognize like 10 different people in the cast, you're never really sure sort of who's going to live and who's going to die, because when you know that many faces, you're like, well, they can't all live. So anyway, it was on Tubi. I think it's still there till the end of the month. It's called The Belko Experiment. I enjoyed it. We thought it was a pretty good, dumb, turn off your brain kind of crappy action movie. And then I had a chance to watch two brand new movies. They're both on Amazon Prime, and both got terrible reviews. So the first one is called Killer Heat, and it's like a murder mystery, and it stars Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Richard Madden. Richard Madden, people may know as Jon Stark from Game of Thrones. He was the eldest brother that was killed at the Red Wedding.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're the two male leads. There's and it's a murder mystery. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is brought in because Richard Madden's twin brother has been killed at the start of the movie before the movie starts, and so this private detective is brought in to sort of figure out, was he murdered? Was it an accident? Because his family's rich, and who's to gain? And of course, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's detective is like an alcoholic who is suffering through a bad divorce, and so it's this. It was just kind of crazy. If you like sort of cheesy detective stories, it was pretty good. I liked it. Again, it got terrible reviews. All the reviews I read said like, oh, it was predictable. You knew exactly what was going to happen. I didn't. I thought I did, but there was enough twists and turns that I still enjoyed it. It's on Amazon, so it's not going to cost you anything to give it a watch. So I would check it out. It's called Killer Heat. Takes place in Greece, so there's a lot. Again, the visuals title. Look nice. Terrible. Yeah, it is a terrible title.
We should maybe do that sometime. That would be a good topic sometime.
Yeah, good
movies with bad titles. Not even good movies but just movies with terrible titles.
Yeah. I'm going to skip over the other one I was going to talk about because I just remembered I also watched A Clockwork Orange was on one of the channels the other night, and I watched that, and it's interesting because. Last week a couple weeks ago we did a topic of movies with narrators, and both this one I just talked about, Killer Heat, and A Clockwork Orange, both have narrators. And I totally forgot A Clockwork had the narration from Alex, and I was like, so it was interesting from that perspective. But anyway, Clockwork Orange, I hadn't sat down and actually watched a movie in 15 years or more. I mean, I've seen it a couple of times. Everyone knows sort of the critical scenes. I actually sat down and watched it. It is amazing. I forgot how good it was. I think I liked it more now than I did the last time I watched it 10 or 15 years ago. I think much like we talked about with things like Team America, World Police, and probably like we're going to talk about with tonight's movie, there's a lot of stuff in there that is probably more relevant today than it was when the movie came out. And if you haven't seen Clockwork Orange in a while and you're a film guy, like, give it a watch. It's going to wake you up a little bit.
And David Prowse is in it. The guy that played Darth Vader. He's got a role.
Yes.
In it. Yep.
Yes. And then finally, I had a chance to watch a short documentary.
For 40 days and 40 nights, he watches documentaries. He likes to learn about the world. It's Derek's Documentaries. Derek's Documentaries.
Do tell.
All right. So, as I mentioned many times on the show, I have this extensive cable package. I'm one of those guys that continues to pay for cable TV. And one of the packages I have is called Hollywood Suite. They have 4 channels, one that's mostly dedicated to the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s.
It's good.
So the Hollywood Suite, I believe it's Canadian. I believe the channel is Canadian. They have some sponsored programming that they produced by Hollywood Suites. And they have a documentary series called A Year in Film. And what they do is they pick a year and they do a 45-minute documentary and they interview some experts about, like, you know, what were the highs and lows and why are some of these movies interesting. And they really try and get a wide perspective. They try and go for not just the big box office huge movies, but they try and go for like independent movies, foreign films, movies that were influential for certain like subgenres and subcultures, things of that nature. So I find that it's not just, hey, it was 1985 and here were the 10 top movies. It's a lot more nuanced than that. So anyway, I had a chance to watch, they've got like a new series, a new batch of them that they've just put out. I watched one this week on 1977. So I thought, well, okay, that's going to be Star Wars. Yep. So sure enough, that's what they said. They're like, they began with Star Wars and they're like, okay, we can't talk about 1977 without talking about Star Wars. So let's just sort of get out of the way. So they talk about that. And then they went into like all these other movies. Now they did talk about things like Smokey and the Bandit and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and again, because there were some like big important Annie Hall, like some important movies. But they talked about like a bunch of foreign films that have gone on to become like cult classics. They talked about some early horror movies. They talked about Eraserhead was in there. What was the David Lynch one? I think it was called Rabid was in there.
Oh, that was Cronenberg.
Cronenberg, yes. Yeah. There was I think it was a Japanese horror movie that's just called House that is apparently very influential. It was really interesting. I think I'm a pretty well-versed film guy, but pre-1980, I could certainly use a little more education, and this documentary was really good. It really opened my eyes to a lot of things that I was just not aware of, and I find these they're good. They're usually between 30 and 45 minutes. I think this one was closer to 40 minutes, so I did see they've got 3 or 4 more of them sort of dropping in the next couple of weeks, so I'll keep my eye out for them. But no, it was quite good. A Year in Film, 1977, so
very good
one.
I'm glad that you mentioned that you keep up on cable TV, because I do as well. I watch a lot of cable TV still. I'm old school that way. So I'm watching cable TV recently with my wife, and she gets up, she's walking around, she's not like paying all that much attention. And then all of a sudden she just stops and starts freaking out. And she's like, oh my God. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, what is it? And she's pointing at the TV like in shock. And I'm like asking her like, what's going on? And she points at the TV and she goes, I know her. And it's like some girl on a commercial, some commercial about farms or how farmers drive the economy or something like that. And my wife is like, I went to high school with that girl. This girl is on screen for a grand total of about 4 seconds. And my wife is going nuts. And I'm like, what's the big deal? And she says, well, I know somebody on TV. So I take the time to remind her that she knows someone else that's been on TV. Her husband.
I was going to say, haven't you been on TV?
I'm like,
you were on America's Most Wanted, weren't you?
Not that show. But I'm like, honey, I used to have my own TV show years ago. I'm like, you can look it up on IMDb. You know, I used to be on TV all the time, even after my TV show ended and I went into the academic world. I've been on the news multiple times. Like, they reach out to me constantly to do interviews for one thing or another surrounding the college or the business community or something. I was on the local station here probably 5 times as a guest on multiple shows. I was on the Fantasy Network talking fantasy baseball multiple times. I was in the main studio in Toronto for them. So I remind my wife about all this. You know what she says to me? She's like, yeah, but I know her. I'm like, you know me. Like, I feel like I'm like Rodney Dangerfield. I get no respect. Oh man, none at all. All right, this is what I got.
Here's your dad joke of the week.
Derek, did you hear about the chocolate record player?
No, but it sounds like it could be delicious. Tell me more about it.
It sounds pretty sweet.
Oh. Nice. I almost had it.
Almost.
I was like, oh my God, that was incredible.
Okay, so we got the millennials' take on it.
It's weird.
We might get to scorched earth yet.
But you often have the textbook dancer.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
You've been doing a lot of stuff from the 80s, a lot of comedies.
Holiday Rap by MC Micro G and DJ Swen.
So this wasn't a film that I grew up with.
It's boring as
I think I know that. Could you sing us a few bars?
What the living hell am I watching? All right, Derek, it was over to you this week to choose a movie for us to watch and review. You wanted me to watch Idiocracy from 2006, starring Luke Wilson and Maya Rudolph. I'd never seen it before, so I'm coming in with a fresh look. But maybe you can just start us off. Just talk a little bit about why you wanted me to watch this movie and why you thought it would be good for us to review.
Yeah. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there are movies that don't age well. And we cover a lot of those in our discussions. And then there are movies that age well because you expect them to age well. They're classics. And then there's occasionally the movies that nobody has any expectations for. And a decade passes and suddenly you're going, that movie had a lot more to say than we realized. And like when we did Team America World Police, I think we agreed that while it was good when it came out, it aged like a fine wine and is better today and more relevant today than it ever was when it came out. Now, I'm not saying that this movie is anywhere near as good as Team America World Police, but I think there's a lot going on in this movie that when we look at the world today, we can see a lot of parallels in the worst possible ways. And considering that this movie came out in what year, 2006?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that was on screen in 2006 that at the time seemed ridiculous and was played for laughs that I don't want to say it's come true, but it's leaning heavily in that direction. And suddenly it becomes less of a ridiculous comedy and almost more of a cautionary tale. And so I thought, you know what? I haven't seen this movie in pretty much since it came out. Now, clips of it appear online all the time. People are always posting on TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and all that. You see these little clips. And I saw a clip about a month ago on one of the scenes, and I thought to myself, you know what? I think I need to go back and rewatch it. And I knew you had never seen it and probably never even heard of it. So I thought, why don't we do it for the podcast? I knew you'd go into this blind. I was curious to see, how it spoke to you, or if you just are going to say, this is the dumbest movie I ever saw. And, my IQ has dropped sharply for giving it any of my time. But I kind of think that you might have some things to say about this. So with that in mind, tell me about your first experience with Idiocracy.
I do have some things to say about this. So as you mentioned, this is my first kick at the can with this movie. I'd never seen it. And I just watched it just this morning. So here's my take on this. It's a good concept. Actually, I think it's a great concept for a movie. Perfect opportunity for some like real social commentary. If you think about it, like an overweight, uninformed, irrational population where anti-intellectualism is king. Like that's basically the United States in 2024. It's like perfect timing to look at this. The problem isn't the concept. For me, the problem was in the execution. This is hands down one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my entire life.
Yeah, it definitely has its faults.
It is one very poorly made movie. It reminds me of like a lowest common denominator filmmaking. Like it's sophomoric and just dumb. The people in the future are supposed to be dumb, but the whole movie is dumb. And it's too bad because it's like this missed opportunity. Like I said, great concept. especially when you look at it from the lens of today, because you could argue that people are dumber than they've ever been. So think about it. Every person on the planet right now has a device in their pocket that allows them to look up any fact in the world. They can verify anything in the blink of an eye. You would think that that would mean that people are smarter than ever, with easy access to all this information, but they're not. People are dumber than ever before. So this movie should resonate. This movie should be like holding up a mirror to society, but it's so poorly done. It just misses the mark. It's going to be a no for me, dog.
Yeah, I kind of figured that, but still, I knew you. I didn't know. I figured the concept would resonate with you, and I figured there would be enough that we could talk about out of that. Putting aside some of the terrible performances, putting aside some of the slurs and bad words that certainly wouldn't.
And there were
today.
Lots of them. Yeah,
there were.
That's
but,
okay.
It had its moments, and again, like we were saying, there's a lot going on in here where you're like, on its face, this idea is good. I don't necessarily think it was even scene by scene. Like what they're trying to do in the scene is good, but the execution wasn't fantastic. Like it wasn't funny, and it just was. In many cases, the performances were bad. But,
yeah, the lighting, everything about it was not right. One thing I noticed was I was looking into this, and when the movie was first set for release, the studio and the distributor basically just dumped the film. There was no marketing campaign, no trailers, no ads. They didn't even send out press kits. And It opened in 6 cities and went wide to 130 screens. Like most theatrical releases go out to like 500 or, like 1,000 or 2,000 screens. So I was reading, and this has got some conspiracy theorists out there thinking that, the idea was that the studio was trying to suppress Mike Judge because his vision of the future was just too spot on. But I mean, let's be honest. The studio quashed it not because it's some cutting edge visionary film that upset the social order. They cut it because the film sucked. Like, that's it.
That's fair. That's fair.
So we mentioned it was directed by Mike Judge. It was written by Mike Judge and Ethan Cohen, not Ethan Cohen.
Yeah, I had to double check that myself.
Ethan Cohen starred Luke Wilson and Maya Rudolph, as mentioned. It was made on a budget of $2.4 million, and it took in $495,000
at the box office.
So let's go back in time to 2006. I always ask you this: what movie do you think was number one at the domestic U.S. box office in 2006? I'm going to give you a hint.
Was it
It wasn't Idiocracy. It's $495,000, just shy of the mark. So,
was it a Pirates of the Caribbean movie?
Yes, it was.
I've got to think by then it was probably number 3. No, number 2. I don't know. It was one of them.
I don't friggin' know. Pirates of the Caribbean: Dead Man's Chest.
That was number 2.
Was the number 1 movie at the box office that year, followed up by Cars, X-Men: Last Stand, The Da Vinci Code, and Superman Returns. And then the top 10 was rounded up by Ice Age: The Meltdown at number 6, Happy Feet at 7, Over the Hedge at 8. A lot of animated films.
I was going to say a lot of kids movies, yeah.
Casino Royale, number 9, and Talladega Nights. The Ballad of Ricky Bobby was number 10.
Those are some terrible movies.
Oh, it was awful. 2006, I remember that was the year I first started dating my wife. And so we went to the movies a lot. And I saw a couple of these movies in the movie theater. I saw, I think, Pirates of the Caribbean and Da Vinci Code, Superman Returns, Talladega Nights. Went to see them all. They were all bad. So some movies that were more successful than Idiocracy that year: Wolf Creek, Grandma's Boy.
Oh, I've seen Grandma's Boy. It was funny.
Fat Girls. Now that's PHAT, like the kids say.
Like the kids say? Yeah.
The World's Fastest Indian, and How to Eat Fried Worms.
Okay.
Now, I mean, I get it. You can't judge a movie's merits on its box office. We mentioned that before. But like mainstream audiences, they get it wrong all the time. But you could make the argument that this movie failed because the studio didn't back it, But
that would definitely be a contributing factor.
Exactly.
I don't think that's the only reason.
You can't chalk it up to that as the sole reason. right? Like it just sucks. So, all right. So I want to talk about the cast. We always like to. So Luke Wilson. I want to get into this guy for a second. This guy cannot act. I'm sorry. He just plays himself in every role.
Yeah, he's not my favorite performer. We saw him in Old School. We did that movie a while back.
We reviewed that together.
The Old School was funny. It had a lot of good parts, and honestly, he was my least favorite part.
Yeah, he wasn't contributing to that movie. I'm not sure, how did Luke Wilson ever come to star in comedies? It makes zero sense to me. Like, he's the most vanilla actor that's maybe ever lived. I get it. Like, in this, it can make sense to put a normal average guy into situations where everything's happening around him. You know, he's kind of caught in the middle of it. Like, but there's just something that just doesn't work for me with him. Like in Old School, like you mentioned, he's this super normal, boring guy. And that concept should work when you go into that. But the thing is, again, that's a good concept, but it doesn't work because in that movie, they're calling him the Godfather. They make him out to be some party animal back in the day. Luke Wilson wouldn't even go to a frat party, let alone be a party animal. And then in this movie, he's supposed to be an average guy. So good casting there, I guess, you know, but he has like zero charisma. He has no charm. You don't root for him. He just kind of exists, you know. This movie called for somebody like Michael Cera. Like an underdog, you know, that you kind of root for.
Yeah.
An actor that I mentioned before, the whole point of actors, they got to find truth in the material. I get it. This movie is not Citizen Kane, let's be honest. But that's the actor's job, to find truth. You got to root everything in a way to make it real. Like, you got to take outrageous concepts and just bring truth to the role. If you think about like Michael J. Fox in Back to the Future, you're like, outrageous concept, but he just grounds it in truth. Or Steve Martin in The Jerk, you know, like just scripts with outrageous concepts, but the actors find a way to make it real and just sort of invest you in the journey. And that was missing right off the hop for me. You know, you need that to make this movie work. And Luke Wilson wasn't it. You agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maya Rudolph. What about her? What do you think of her in this?
Again, with so many movies, the women's roles are usually so poorly crafted that they don't really give them enough to work with. You can get the most talented performer in there, but if the role isn't fleshed out, then they do the best with what they've got. And I think I wouldn't even say she did the best with what she's got. I think she did an adequate job with what she was given. I think her talents were wasted, but you know, again, it is what it is. She was a name at the time. I'm pretty sure she was still in Saturday Night Live when this came out, or may have just recently left. But so again, she was going to be a recognizable name on a marquee. Not that it ever really got to a marquee. So,
like Luke Wilson, I would say that she was miscast.
Yeah,
and don't get me wrong. I mean, she can do comedy, but she can't do magic. You know. But if you look at a movie like Bridesmaids, I think you like that movie. Bridesmaids, right?
I thought that movie was great.
Yeah, in that movie, the performances of the cast, again, they're just rooted in truth. You know, the comedy flows from, you know, the situations. And you know, I thought she was a strong part of that cast. But here, she's not in sync with the film. So, I don't know.
Yep.
Stephen Root, I want to mention him because I feel like he actually was in the moment. He actually brought something to this role. Like, Mike Judge puts him in pretty much all of his movies.
I was just about to say, he's like in everything Mike Judge has ever done. He was one of the voices of King of the Hill, and he was in Office Space.
And if you think of in Office Space, you know, in that movie, he basically creates this whole reality for that character. And that's what made it work. The guy with the stapler, remember? Like,
yeah. Oh, I believe me. I remember. Yeah.
I don't know. The thing is, like, the actors are playing dumb people in the future, right? But they have to believe in what they think. They have to exist in that reality, and the humor just kind of should flow from there. But I feel like everybody's just playing caricatures and goofy, outlandish people. So
that's fair.
I don't know. I just feel like my whole point is, like, this movie had the opportunity to be something. It could have been this amazing social commentary, but it just comes off like a film made like by a bunch of grade school students with no aptitude or skill or any experience making films. I don't know. Terry Crews, want to mention him because when he first appears in the movie as the President of America, as they call him, I was like, oh, okay, I was excited. I was like, because I like him on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So I was hopeful he was going to be good in this movie. Spoiler alert, he's not. So I get it. He had to work with the script, and the script is a mess. But what the hell is he doing in this movie? Is he just cashing a paycheck? Like, I don't think so. There was no budget for this movie. So what the hell was anyone doing in this movie? I don't know if they just read the script and thought it was good. I don't know. Or maybe they just wanted to work with Mike Judge or something. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Maybe it was like, hey, we're going to do this movie. It'll be a party every night. You go in, you phone in your lines, you do the best you can, and then we're going to have big parties every night. Like, who knows? Maybe it was just something like that. It was come and hang out with these people. A lot of them are really fun.
Well, I want to mention Sarah Rue. She was the Attorney General. She was uncredited in this movie. Mm-hmm. She wouldn't even appear in the credits. Probably a good thing. I recognize her from some TV show. She was on 2.5 Men and The Big Bang Theory.
I remember. Yeah, I recognize her from The Big Bang Theory. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God. I don't know. Maybe just me. I think she's just beautiful. I recognize the Secretary of State too. He was Michael Bolton in the Office Space. Yeah, you had me watch that. David Herman, I think his name is.
Yep.
And then Dax Shepard. We should mention him.
Yeah, he's not my favorite performer in the world. Mm-hmm. Just I find that the things he has been in have generally not been things that I have any real desire to watch. Like he was in the film reimagining of Chips based on the TV show.
Oh, and interesting.
It was okay, but
he wasn't the Eric Estrada character, I hope.
He was not Ponch. He was the other guy, John.
Oh, okay.
He was the John guy. Yeah. So again, it's but you go into a movie like that knowing this is going to be awful, and it was. But like, yeah, he's not.
He started off on Punk, right, with Ashton Kutcher. Doing Punk.
Oh, is that really?
Yeah, I think that's how he got started. At one point, like in his personal life, he dated Kate Hudson, and now he's married to Kristen Bell.
Right. So, yeah, you're right. I'm looking at his IMDb here. Yeah, he was in Punk'd with.
He's
with
got something going for him. I don't know. The interesting thing about him, though, I thought, which is cool, was him and Kristen Bell. They dated for years, but they wouldn't get married until California passed same-sex marriage legislation. And in 2013, they passed it, and they were like, okay, we're getting married. So that was pretty cool about him. All right, so let's talk about this movie a little bit. That's the cast. So it opens up with the scenes of like the rednecks reproducing and apparently smart, affluent people not reproducing.
Yeah.
I feel like right off the hop, this is where the movie gets it wrong.
This I think was I love this part.
What did you like about that? Like
that it's so true.
But it's like it's if to say like rednecks basically take over the population and dumb it down. But I think that misses the mark because it's not just rednecks that are dumb. I mean, they are dumb. Don't get me wrong, but they don't hold a monopoly on dumb. There's a lot of dumb people that aren't rednecks. You know, for me, it should be less about rednecks and more just about dumb people in general. If we have learned one thing over the last decade, Derek, dumb people are everywhere, not just in hick towns.
Sure. But I think, again, they're trying to really paint the picture that people who are highly intelligent, who have good jobs, who are usually affluent because they are in good jobs that pay well, make more rational decisions about things like starting a family. It's not, hey, I'm a human being. I have a right to have a family whenever I want. You know, leave me alone. I'm going to do what I want. And if I end up with 9 kids, that's my business. The idea being, well, if you're smart and affluent and you think about it logically, you're going to wait to have a family until you are financially able to support them and provide for them in a way that is, going to be helpful. And as opposed to people who, as depicted in this movie, don't give any forethought to it. They just let their base desires drive them. And hey, if they end up with 5 kids by 3 different parents, it's like, well, it is what it is, and we'll see what happens next. And inevitably, those same people end up having more kids, and they generally have them at very young ages. And it's just it becomes a war of attrition. It's the sheer numbers on the one side of the ledger grossly outweigh the numbers on the other side of the ledger. And as they play for laughs in this one, which, not so much ha-ha funny, because the other couple waited so long, it became, then they were having problems with fertility because they were obviously well past their prime. And so it's like, well, they ended up not having kids. Whereas on the other side, they were like, this guy looks like he's probably 20 and has like 9 children. So it's like, well, the math, you just need to do the math. This side, they're just going to overwhelm them with numbers. So again, it's going to extremes to really slap you in the face with what the point is in the first 5 minutes of the movie. And I liked that about it. It made me laugh. So I was like, you know what? Okay. I immediately knew where this was going to go.
There was one scene there at the beginning, too, that kind of stuck out to me with the military guy when he's explaining how he had to recruit the prostitute by going through her pimp. But again, I felt like it was a missed opportunity. Like it felt a little bit off. I don't know. It missed the mark for me. I like how he's like winning over her pimp was the difficult part. And then it's just slide after slide of him hanging out with the pimp and the hooker. Yeah. And then like later he walks in the hospital room and he says to Luke Wilson and Maya Rudolph, he's like, okay, we're almost done here. And I felt like that needed a reaction shot.
Yeah.
Or something. Like maybe just like cut to Maya Rudolph kind of looking at him sideways or something. Like it needed, like it was missed. I don't know. It just didn't connect. So
yeah, that was sort of a of its time kind of reference where,
and I get that, but I think you could still pull it off. I mean, you could pull that off if you had them. I feel like the slides maybe should have been a little bit more extreme. Like maybe have some nudity in there, maybe have some like drug paraphernalia, like have it go all the way like down, and then have him come and then think he can start using that word. Like again, it's got to be real. I don't know. I just like again, like they depict him as he's kind of all in with the pimp. He uses the N word and he's got the gold tooth and ultimately gets busted in the prostitution ring. But it just didn't feel real to me. I don't know. The pimp's name was Upgrade, right? Was it like 2 D's or double dose of
GRAYDD with 2 D's at the end.
Right, for the double dose of pimping.
Yeah.
Right. So they get to the future and everything's gone to hell. Everyone's dumb. The number one TV show is Ow My Balls.
Or as we like to call it, Jackass.
Yeah. Or America's Funniest Videos. Right. Sure. And I like how Fuddruckers is now.
Yeah.
Like there's no more subtle double entendres or like any words that sound, or everything just straight up curse words and sexual references everywhere, and the language they use. Oh my God. When he goes to see the doctor and the doctor's like, yeah, you sound and your it's all
yeah.
Like, jeez. The number one movie in the country is just called and that's all it is for 90 minutes. It won 8 Oscars for including best
screenplay.
Which again, it has like grains of humor in it, but it just misses it all. Like, I don't know. It just, and everything is like mispronounced and misspelled. Like they don't, instead of saying escape, they say escape, and entrance instead of entrance, and economy instead of economy. And one thing I did, like when the cops are chasing them and then they're like behind them and then they just look behind them and they're not there. And Luke Wilson's like, I think they just forgot about us. Which I thought again, like there were elements here that could have been good.
One of the speaking of the cops, so one of the scenes related to that I liked was when Dax Shepard is driving Luke Wilson, and then they realize they get pulled over and they leave the car, and then the cops all show up and they start like shooting and blowing up the car, and the two guys are hiding behind the dumpster.
Right.
And then Dax Shepard's character starts like cheering, and Luke Wilson turns to him and goes, "That's your car." And that to me just hit home so much. Like that's what we're seeing in now, where people are like, I'm making these choices and I'm voting for this thing. And it's like, do you not recognize how this is going to affect you personally? And like, no, they don't.
Nope. And they cheer it on like, yeah. So again, like the commentary is kind of there, but it just misses the mark. That's a good point. Like, because, that he was cheering on his car getting blown up, which is basically like what we're seeing today with, some people voting against their own self-interest. Speaking of the government, I like how they call it the House of Representing.
Yeah.
That was interesting. And the president comes out and gives a speech, and he basically just says, sit your monkey ass down. That's his speech. No. Yeah. One thing I noticed, too, was Luke Wilson. At one point, they just kind of give it a hint, and then they never mention it again. But he starts to adapt to them at one point because he uses the term economy instead of economy. And then he catches himself. And I was like, they should have explored that further. Like, how he kind of adapts to that. I once knew a guy that moved down to the southern states for a while. And he came back and he's like, hey, man, how's it going? He comes in and he starts talking and he's got this like super distinct southern accent. He sounded like he'd been living in Tennessee his whole life. He'd only been down there for a couple of months. And I feel like dumb people do this. This guy was dumb and he comes back, he's talking like the yokels. But like not everybody does that. Right. I work with a guy right now from Ireland. He's been here in Canada for 25 years. Still talks with an Irish accent. He hasn't adapted to the locals. You got British people that come to North America, like decades later, they still talk with a British accent. Mm-hmm. Like I don't hear Michael Caine talking with an American accent. So I wonder, like, why do some people pick it up and others don't? Is it just the dumb ones? You know what I mean? Like, people like that, don't you?
Somewhat, yeah. I find that I tend to do that a little bit myself. We work because I work in communications, so all of our messages have to be available in English and French. My French is terrible, and we use a translating service, and so I am one of the representatives that manages that relationship. So I am constantly on the phone with people from Quebec who speak French as their first language. And when they speak English, there's clearly an accent. And I find if I've been on a call for a couple hours or if I've been back and forth with them through the course of the day, I find that I feel myself sort of slipping into sounding a little bit more like them. I think it's just like an attrition thing, right? It's like you hear them saying things a certain way. And when there's 5 people on the call and 4 of them sound a certain way, it's like my brain is just like, oh, well, that must be how you say that. And you start to imitate them. But again, it's like, it's not like you're doing it in a way to make fun of them. It's like your brain almost is like, nope, that's the way you need to do it to get this done. And, I don't even realize I'm doing it half the time, but people sitting near me who can hear me on the call, they're like, I didn't realize that you were French. And I'm like, why would you think that? And they're like, well, I overheard like when you were talking, you had a bit of a French accent. And I was like, that was unintentional, but thanks for giving me the heads up.
I thought they should explore that further in this script, but I thought it was interesting when they had Fox News come on and the anchors are basically American gladiators.
Yeah,
that was pretty good. And there was one scene I thought was pretty funny when Luke Wilson goes to prison.
Yes,
and then he uses his superior intellect to get out. He's just like, yeah, actually, I'm supposed to be getting out of prison, and the guy's like, okay, your line's over there. He just gets to walk out. I was like, that should have been more of that. And again, I felt like it should have played up more the fact that he was like not a really smart guy, but in this situation, he's like the smartest guy on the planet.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Again, I just felt like it was missed. So I have a question for you. Or at least it's supposed to be social commentary, or at least people have put that on this movie. So my question is, I know we're not there yet, but are we getting there?
Sadly, yes, I think we are. I think rather we're going to continue down this path for a while before we start to make any turns.
Yeah, I think so too. Sadly, because if you think about it, like this movie, the government's taken over by corporate interests because they use like Gatorade on the crops or whatever.
Yeah.
And today you got Elon Musk with his fingers in the pie. And in the movie, you've got this president talking like a moron. And today you've got, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Basically anything that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth could have been in this movie, 100%. And it would just fit in. Just like, go back to what I said, like, people today have the luxury of unlimited knowledge. The answer to every question.
Yep.
Every fact on earth is available in their pocket. And they're dumber than ever. I mean, a lot of that can be chalked up to the overwhelming amount of misinformation and disinformation that's available, on your phones. But I feel like people just use critical thought less and less. They're just ripe to be conned,
Yep.
So it is amazing how accurate this movie is, in the sense that people are dumber and dumber all the time. And that's the thing that's most accurate about it. But, like that whole rise of anti-intellectualism, I don't know. There's just this feeling that everyone's going around. Like, it's like the whole quote, you've probably heard this quote before, my ignorance is as good as your knowledge. And that's...
I never heard that before.
Oh, yeah. Like, that seems to be pervasive today. People thinking like, my ignorance is as good as your knowledge. You got to respect my opinion, even though it's stupid, it's dumb, it's not rooted in any fact. We're supposed to take it at face value. And I think that's what's going to take us down the road to where this movie is. But, but the movie itself, I don't know. I just feel like it misses the mark. Any last thoughts?
Yeah. No, I think your critique is fair. Mm-hmm. I like I said, I think the idea of what this movie is trying to do is great, and I think it was certainly ahead of its time in that regard. I think that if someone was to take a very similar idea to this and give it a 2024, 2025 reimagining with a little more finesse and possibly a lot more money, they'd really have something. But as a time capsule from 2006, parts of this movie are very much rooted in 2006, but at the same time, there's some things in this movie that you just have to look at and go, man, it's sad that this was imagined as the impossible in 2006, and that's why it was seen as being so ridiculously humorous. Or whereas now you're like, this is kind of spot on. So I'm glad I rewatched it. I don't think I need to rewatch it again anytime soon. This isn't the most fantastic movie in the world, but I do think that there are parts in it that are worth watching. And the good news is it's short. It's like 90 minutes, give or take. Mm-hmm. And it's available on Disney. So if you already have Disney, you don't have to pay anything to watch it. And yeah, I mean, you always ask me to give it a rating. I would probably give it like a 6 out of 10. Like it has a grain of a great idea there, but to your point, the execution was not really there. The performances for the most part were pretty bad. The material overall was, it was what it was. A lot of it was just juvenile and fart jokes, which is fine. I mean, hey, no one likes those kinds of things more than I do, but it was certainly trying to be more than it was, and it just never got there.
So before I get to my rating, I do want to mention, if you're interested in this kind of commentary, this kind of social, view in a film, there's a thing, I don't know if it's on Netflix, it's one of the streaming services. It was called Don't Look Up.
Yeah.
I feel like it hit the mark a lot more than this one did.
Agreed. Yeah, that was really, really good.
So I would give it a 2 out of 10. The only thing keeping it from getting a 0 is the concept. Because it's a great concept, but just really, really, really poorly done. So that was my take on the whole thing.
All right.
Oh, sorry.
That's fair.
All right. What do you say we have some?
Fun with Caveman.
One thing that we did not mention about this movie, but it's kind of, it happens a lot, is there's a lot of parody product placement in this movie.
Yes.
And this is not the only movie that has used parody or fictional products or brands in movies. So tonight, I'm going to test your knowledge of parody or fictional products in brands or movies. Okay? Pretty simple. Straight up trivia. Okay? Let's start with some easy ones. Derek, what's the name of the company that makes every product that Wile E. Coyote buys in the Roadrunner cartoons?
Oh, that's Acme.
Yes. See? Easy. Which, of course, begs the question, if he can afford to buy all those products to catch the Roadrunner for a meal, why doesn't he just buy food?
Or buy his own Roadrunner.
Yeah. Okay. What's the name of the knockoff fast food restaurant in Coming to America?
Oh, They have the Big Mac. We have the Big Mick. That was McDowell's.
We got 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. Our buns have no seeds.
There you go.
Okay, staying with Coming to America, what is the name of the Jerry Curl product hawked by Daryl and his family?
Oh, it was it called Soul Glow?
Just let yourself, baby, feeling oh so silky smooth, and just let it shine through. Just let yourself.
Look what you've unleashed here, Derek. Okay.
Man, you really hit those high notes.
I know. Saturday Night Live, known for its commercial parodies.
Yes.
One of the most famous of those commercial parodies featured a celebrity-endorsed product that dispenses luncheon meat in public bathroom stalls.
Oh, yeah.
Can you name the parody product?
I sure can. Yeah, it was John Hamm's John Hamm.
All right, let's stay with SNL for a minute. What was the name of the parody beer that was aimed at the homosexual community and featured Van Halen's Beautiful Girls?
Yeah, it was Schlitz Gay.
Yes. If you're thirsty and you're gay. That was good. Speaking of beer, what fictional brand of beer is Homer Simpson's favorite beer?
Oh, that's Duff.
And can you name the drink that is the most popular beverage in the world of Harry Potter?
Oh, was it? It was like a root beer. It was a butter beer. Was that it?
Yes, very good. What fictional product spawned the monster of Dan Aykroyd's imagination in Ghostbusters?
Oh, that was the Stay Puft Marshmallows. Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Yes. Can you name the movie that was featured on the marquee of the Holomax in Back to the Future Part 2?
Oh, it was definitely a Jaws movie. It was Jaws. Jeez, what number? 21.
Close. It was Jaws 19.
19.
Jaws 19. Okay, so in Anchorman, The Legend of Ron Burgundy, Paul Rudd introduces a new cologne to Ron with one of the most memorable lines in the movies. He's like, 60% of the time, it works every time. Yeah, can you name that fictional cologne?
Oh, can I ever? It was Sex Panther.
Okay, in Pulp Fiction, Bruce Willis goes into the bar to meet with Ving Rhames. Famous scene. What brand of fake cigarettes does he buy from the bartender?
He buys a pack of Red Apples.
All right, in Grindhouse, there's a movie trailer for a fictional film where an FBI hires a Hispanic mercenary rather than risk their own agents on a suicide mission. Can you name the movie in the trailer of Grindhouse?
No, I've never seen Grindhouse, so no, I can't.
Oh, hint, it stars Danny Trejo, and it was also made into a real movie in 2010.
Was that Machete?
Yes. Okay, what was the name of the low fuel economy car in the film RoboCop?
Jeez. I don't know.
It was the 6000 Sucks.
Okay. You say so.
Tropic Thunder. Remember that movie? This is the last one. Tropic Thunder.
It's been a while.
Yeah. It featured a parody advertisement for an energy drink. Can you name the fake product?
No, I haven't seen that movie since the theater.
Booty Sweat.
Sure.
The movie also featured a parody ad for the Bust-a-Nut candy bar, too.
Okay.
So, hey, you did pretty good on that, though. You got a lot of them. You got almost all of them. So,
yeah, I thought they were going to be a lot harder. I was surprised at how many of them came to me. So that was. All
right. So next time it's time for a topic, I guess, when we come back, or do a top 10 list or whatever. We might have some time off coming up soon, do we? Or?
Yeah, I think we probably try and squeeze one more show in before the holidays, and we'll take a couple of weeks off.
Yeah. All right. So until then, we'll come back next week or next time with a topic. Until then, I'm Chris McBrien. On behalf of myself and Derek Myers, I want to say thanks very much for taking the time to listen to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.